Yeah. So the huge thing with ODS and now MIPS also is it's all about trying to separate your head from the shell during an impact. During an impact, if the helmet hits, you want to try to keep your head from moving side to side. You want it to continue in a linear path. So what 6D did is they created two layers of EPS that were separate from each other, and they were isolated by rubber dampers.
Welcome to the OneGang Worldwide podcast, your ultimate ride into the world of motorcycles. Visit cyclesworldwide.com, where we offer a completely free marketplace for everything motorcycles. Join our OneGang community where you can connect, share info, and swap stories with riders from all over the world. Join for free at cyclesworldwide.com and be a part of the OneGang community right now.
Today on OneGang Worldwide, we sit down with a guy who went from racing District 16 in Wisconsin as number 703 to designing the helmets that protect riders around the world. Nick Kerscher started as a Moto kid wrenching on his own bikes, became an engineer at 6D, and today he's the lead development engineer behind the future of Fox Racing and Bell helmets. Nick, welcome to the show. We're grateful to have you, man.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for having me on. Hell of an intro there. So that was kind of
That's good, man. Hey, Nick, welcome, brother. Awesome to have you on the show. And we start the show usually with the break the ice section. We're going to wrap off 10 questions. No right or wrong answer. Just have fun with it and get the quirky side of you before we get into the journey. So you let me know when you're ready.
Absolutely. Hit me.
All right, let's do it. What's more stressful, an engineering deadline or sitting at the gate with 40 dudes revving to take you out at the first turn?
Definitely on the starting gate.
All right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Honda, Kawasaki, Suzuki, Yamaha, or other as your favorite dirt bike?
Man, I'm a Kawi guy right now, but Yamaha was my go-to my entire life. So I got to go Yamaha there.
All right, cool. Go-to alcoholic beverage. And if you don't drink, what's your go-to snack?
Oh, that's a good one. Jameson is usually what I go to.
Nice.
Yeah, a little nightcapper. That's kind of something that's been in my family for a while and kind of just carried on. Yeah.
I like Jameson too, man. For the price, it's good. Good drink. All right. Most underrated piece of protective gear.
Oh, an easy answer there is a helmet, because I don't think a lot of people invest as much into the helmet as maybe they should, but I would say helmet and boots are probably the top two for sure.
Yeah, agreed. Favorite track of all time?
Man, Sunset Ridge in Illinois is definitely my favorite. It's got a mixture of sand and dirt that makes it super loamy. It gets rough, lots of ruts. Yeah, that's my favorite.
All right, killer. If you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who are you breaking bread with?
Travis Pastrana.
Travis,
Nice.
All right. It's funny, the dirt bike guys always pick Travis. it's
Yeah.
especially the young guys like you, man. They always pick Travis.
He's a legend, man.
Yeah, man, for sure. All right. Is all the Bluetooth technology making it safer or more distracting for riders wearing helmets?
I know this is supposed to be a rapid fire, but I think it depends how you look at it and what the application is. I think if it's in like Supercross, in an active environment where you need full focus on the track and riders around you, it could be a distraction where if somebody's in your ear the whole time, giving you line selections and things like that, I could see it being troublesome. But if it's used for like safety instances, telling you that a rider's down, maybe a red flag's out, something like that, definitely I could see it being a safer solution. And
awesome.
Then, yeah, same goes for road solutions too.
Yeah, awesome answer, man, because you took it to the track. And I was thinking different, but it's a great perspective to get it from somebody who rides the track. All right. 9, who is your band to crank up when deadlines are due?
It depends what mood I'm in. I like Paramore. On a different side of things, I like Blink-182 also.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, I got a great story with Blink-182, man. I was still in Boston. I think maybe like 23 or 24 out of college. Had my first job, and Blink just came out with their first album, and they came to Providence, Rhode Island, and with Everclear. It was the two of them, and I got a chance to see Blink before they made it big, and I was like, man, these guys are badass. So it's funny to see them now still at this point in time, still kicking butt. So
Yeah.
all right, last question. Do you secretly judge people's helmets when you walk through a track?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's every helmet that I see in public, I am looking at and diagnosing.
That's fire. Well, you did it, brother. You passed the 10. You did it in a great speed. So let's continue on to the journey.
Awesome.
Right on. All right, Nick. So let's start with your early passions and your roots. Take us back to where you grew up, those Wisconsin days. What did your early world look like before racing and engineering?
Yeah, I would say we could maybe start when I was maybe 8 years old or so, around third grade. I had exposure to off-road and dirt bikes, four-wheelers and things through my family. I had a cousin that lived on a farm. He always had four-wheelers. He was about 10 years older than me, so he had a YZ125,
Nice.
and him and his buddy they build ramps and stuff and do crazy stuff. He was all into mountain biking too. And so when I would visit his house, I would see his shop and everything he was working on. He'd have clutch plates laid on the workbench and things. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. Pretty badass. I didn't really understand the risks and how dangerous it was at the time. And when I'd go over there, he'd always have like Nitro Circus playing on his TV and on the shop and stuff. So I had early exposure there. And then at school, I met a friend who had dirt bikes, and he had a Trans World Motocross magazine that we would look at during recess. And we'd go through there and pick out, they'd have the new models for the year. And at that age, we were looking at 65s or 85s or something where we're like comparing between the brands of what the weights were, what the cost was, and like
awesome.
pick apart our favorite. And he had XR100s also, or maybe it was even smaller at that time, but his dad, we obviously hit it off, and then his dad showed me how to ride a dirt bike, and he was on the back, showed me how to use a clutch and stuff like that. So we kind of kicked it off from there. And so then moving up into like sixth grade or so, I met another friend that was heavy into racing motocross, and he was on 85s, lived 10 minutes from me. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Loretta Lynn, but he was like a top prospect in Wisconsin and was going to Loretta's and stuff. And so I ended up at that time then, it took me 3 years from third grade to sixth grade to convince my dad to buy a dirt bike. And we ended up buying my first dirt bike from him, which was one of his old race bikes. And for somebody starting out, an 85 is a lot of power.
For sure.
The power to weight ratio is pretty big.
Those two strokes were crazy.
Yeah, but super fun. And we always rode together. Like we would, during the summer, we wouldn't have anybody watching us. And I grew up in a neighborhood in Appleton, Wisconsin. And one of my neighbors, I would say we had like 1.5 acres of land per lot. And one of my neighbors bought the land next to him so that nobody would build there. And he allowed me to build a dirt bike track on it.
Yeah.
And he also had a golf green in the middle of it, so he could chip off of his porch or whatever. And then I was able to ride the dirt bike around the outside. And he also worked for a housing company, just a building company. And so I asked him if I could build some jumps out there. And then a week later, he was having dump truck loads of dirt dropped off from a house that they had built. So that was super nice. And, built a playground out there. Neighbors hated it because I had a two-stroke just in the middle of a neighborhood. And the noise would just ricochet off the windows.
Hey, quick question. Take me into the negotiations with your parents to get the bike. How did that all go?
Oh my gosh. I don't totally remember what I used for negotiation tactics or anything like that, but I would just ask every single day. And I think eventually my dad was just like, I'm not going to scratch this itch out of him, basically, and I have to fold over and get him one. So I would pray like every night. Like, sure enough, it happens. That was fun. But yeah, actually back to getting the dirt bike for the first time, I got it in February. So it was ice cold in Wisconsin. And we had a lawn tractor that you could put a snowblower on the front of. And so my dad blew a track around the yard that was
that's cool.
A big loop, basically.
That's great.
Yeah, just so I could ride the thing during the winter months and also learn how to use the clutch and everything on that bigger bike. Man, I remember getting around. There was still some ice patches, and of course, the rubber would hit the ice, and I'd just go down. I was getting so frustrated, and then I get up, kick the bike. It's freezing out. My hands are freezing, and I'm grabbing onto the ice cold lever, and lever's breaking off when I'm crashing on the ice, and it's kind of a mess. But looking back, it was so cool of my dad to build that.
Yeah, for sure, man.
So,
Seriously. Nick,
yeah.
what do you remember about those early District 16 days? Nerves, excitement, pressure. What was that like? And we also want to hear about your number, the 703, if that has any story behind it.
The number came from my buddy that I met in 6th grade. He just went with his birthday. He was 607. It was June 7th. So I did the same. My birthday's July 3rd and just went with 703. So
Sweet.
Not like a huge story, but
There's
kind of how
something
that
to
came
it,
to
though.
be. And then, getting into the racing side of things, my dad was super cautious, was letting me race. As soon as we got the bike, he was like, hey, got you the bike, but you're not racing. And so I would just go to the races with my buddies and I would just help them out, be a mechanic or whatever throughout the years. And then as soon as I hit 18, I was like, Dad, sorry, but I'm going racing.
I'm an adult.
Yeah. Yeah. So my first race was at Pine Ridge in Wisconsin. That's also one of my favorite tracks, similar to Sunset Ridge, similar in dirt, I would say. But man, I was so nervous that first day. I barely slept, got 2 hours of sleep. And then I remember going to the track because my bike had Red Bull graphics on it. And it was a Red Bull event. And I was like, oh my gosh, are they going to see that I have Red Bull graphics and I'm not sponsored by them? This is illegal. I was like, oh, worried about that, which is just hilarious. But yeah, man, my first race, I crashed 6 times, just trying way too hard, and a lot of just tip overs, gassing it too hard, coming out of the corner and sliding out, stuff like that. But I was just locked in from there. I just loved it. There's something about racing and just getting pelted with dirt and stones that just really pisses you off, and like it just gives you that drive, like
Get ahead of
in a war almost. Like when you're on that starting gate and you're gearing up and you start the bike, you're like, all right, let's do this. You're just in it and locked in, and you're going to be suffering for the next 15, 20 minutes and battling. So that's pretty fun.
That's killer. Hey, when did you first realize you were kind of drawn to how things work on the side of the motorcycle world?
Yeah, so that's another interesting one where my parents, so my dad was a mechanical engineer and my mom a nurse.
Cool.
I had the blend of, just seeing how things work and understanding the medical injury side of things also. And so like my dad had a heavy interest in woodworking and he had a shop. And so he was always building stuff and I could see that. And I always had an appreciation for him to just go find a problem, or if there was a problem with a car or one of my lawn tractors or snowblower or something, and he could just take it apart, no manual, and figure it out, replace the part and make it going again. I was always around that and always had an interest in it and understanding how things work because I was just by him watching stuff. And then that just translated to dirt bikes so easily because he just let me do my thing and he didn't really help me with stuff. It was just like, hey, here's the air filter. You got to clean this. Every time you ride. Yeah. And of course, there was times where I didn't clean the air filter and the engine blew up and I was just like, you learned your lesson. So you got to stay on the maintenance. Yeah.
I remember one of my best friends on the planet, his dad got him this awesome Dodge Ram for his first truck, but the engine wasn't running and he's an engineer. So he was saying, I'll do this with you, and getting to see him work. Cause I was the same way. I had a couple of older brothers and we would just tinker and figure stuff out, but seeing an actual engineer, and he was mechanical, but he would take bolts off, put them in a bag and label them. And just seeing that alone blew my mind. Holy crap, I could do that. That'll make the reassembly 1,000 times easier. Nick, the next question we had was actually like your time at the University of Wisconsin and what made you decide to pursue engineering. So is there that leads to that story. So I guess just tell us about how those days went.
Yeah, I remember trying to make the decision of what my career path was going to be. And at the time, like the school that I went to, a pretty small town, I would say like education wasn't a super high priority for a lot of kids in my school. You're going to be a farmer or you're going to go into the trades or something like that where, yeah, more blue collar jobs. And so I was just like, I don't know if engineering is really for me. Maybe I want to be a mechanic. And then I talked to my dad and they don't get paid as much. You're going to be working hard hours. That's going to be a lot tougher route for you long term. So I suggest you go into engineering. And then I was debating biomedical engineering because I had the influence from my mom in the medical side. And then I got the class list and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be great at organic chemistry. So maybe I'll just stick to mechanical.
That's fine.
So anyway, yeah, just pick mechanical and the rest was history from there. It was a great fit, but man, I struggled the first couple of years with all of the gen ed classes where you're getting calculus and chemistry and
the worst.
Yeah. And being that I was in a smaller high school without AP classes and stuff, I was going into a D1 university where a ton of other kids at my level had classes prior or better education than I did. So I didn't really know how to study. I was catching up on a lot of classes and things that way. And I would have professors that didn't speak great English and I was trying to figure out how to learn at that point. It was really tough for me in the beginning. And during that time too, I was still trying to hold on to racing and going to races and stuff and trying to get out and have fun on the weekends when really I probably needed to stay back and study. Fast forward a couple of years into my college career, when I was a junior, I was racing 3 weeks before school started in August and I broke my foot at a race. So I went into my junior year on crutches at a university where I had to walk miles. I would really have the engineering textbooks on my back. So I had a little knee scooter and things. I was boogieing around campus and I had a heavy workload that first fall semester. And I ended up having to drop a class because I was just so overwhelmed mentally with trying to keep my foot healing and going to the doctor weekly, physical therapy and all this stuff. So at that point, I ended up going into a co-op with a company called H&S Manufacturing, which is an 8-month stint where it was my first true engineering job. And their company was based around designing and manufacturing agricultural equipment. So like manure spreaders and hay rakes, things like that. So I got thrown into engineering and working with SolidWorks, designing things. And this is like, when I look back, this is really what changed my career path and like really gave me the drive to get into the moto industry. Is I met a guy there who was a crew chief for Red Bull Team Menzies for off-road truck racing. I don't know how in the hell he ended up in Appleton, Wisconsin from Las Vegas, but he had a complete change of careers. I don't know if his wife was from Wisconsin. I think she maybe was, but anyway, they got there. When I started talking to him and I had those gears turning in my head of, man, this is a possibility now that I know somebody who came from that industry. I think I can do this. And then that really fueled the fire for me to go on the Baja SAE team at school. And that team, we basically build a buggy from scratch with a little 10 horsepower Briggs & Stratton engine in it. We had a team of 10 to 12 people and you could pick and choose what area of the car you wanted to build, design, and you could use that for credits. Actually, you could spend a certain amount of hours in the shop working on things, designing, and get credit for it. So that was an easy in for me. And I was super involved with that. And then, of course, met more people that had the same interests in dirt biking and racing and things, and kept progressing from there. And then, I don't know if you had more questions on that, but
I was gonna ask you. Yeah, I was gonna. No, it's cool. It's cool. The story's awesome. Do you think that if you weren't racing or didn't have that prior physical experience on how the motorcycle works, how everything goes, that your path would have led towards the engineering side? Or do you think that racing just made you a better engineer because you understood how things function?
I think I still would have went to the engineering side, but man, the racing side of things and being hands-on with rebuilding a top end on a 2-stroke and understanding the consequences of designing parts improperly or assembling them improperly of just working on an engine, knowing that like after you do it a couple of times, you really can't put it together wrong because the engineers design it that way, unless you're like leaving parts out or something like that's just on you. I think it definitely helped. And I was going through the theoretical side of classes. I could easily correlate it back to a practical scenario and apply that logic, and it would just click a lot easier that way. Yeah.
Right on. All right, let's get into the building the engineer years. Your early work was outside of the moto world with Kimberly-Clark. What did that stage teach you about manufacturing materials and design?
Oh man, it taught me that I don't ever want to work in a paper mill again. I'll tell you that.
Smell.
Yeah, the smell.
So yeah. So I worked on a paper machine that made Scott shop towels, the blue rags that you see everywhere. And it's the one machine in the world that makes those towels. So this machine was built in 1974, I think. And what was pretty cool then is the engineering drawings for the machine were all hand drawn.
Yeah.
And we had all those drawings at the mill. And so I would just go in there and you get a big E-size sheet of paper and it would have all the hand calculations on it for beam bending and stress analysis, stuff like that on this machine 50 plus years ago. So that was super intriguing. But the hard part was that I was tasked with being the reliability engineer on the machine, and a machine that's that old is going to have some problems. And of course, if you have issues and you have to shut down, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that you're losing an hour that the machine is down. So there's a lot of pressure to make sure that you're working well with the mechanics to make sure that they have a good schedule of checking and lubricating the machine. The big thing was like trying to keep water out of bearings and understanding why the bearings failed. So anyway, it was a good first job to have, but I knew that it didn't apply to where my end goal was ultimately at, and still had that fire, even though I graduated and I applied to 100 plus companies in the moto industry and didn't get a call back. Essentially, I still had that drive and fire to want to get there eventually. And so while I was in school, something that we may have brushed over a little bit, I was already emailing and talking to a bunch of companies in the moto industry. I had the HR emails of all the brands I wanted to apply to, and only 2 got back to me. It was Bell helmets and 60 helmets. And so I had a call with Bell helmets to try to be an intern for the following summer. I had my senior year left, but talked to him. Nothing really came out of it because I would have had to move to California for a summer and didn't necessarily want to support that financially and things. So that was a bit tough, but I was in contact with Robert from 60 Helmets at the same time. And they had an opening in 2018. And so I was emailing him every single month, even if they didn't have a job opening. I just wanted to stay in touch with them. And I ended up visiting. So the other thing too is I have family in California, some relatives that we would vacation with every 4 years or so. And so I had a cousin that was already in California, and that's where 60 was based. And so in 2018, I went out to visit him, and I wanted to make a point that I am going to visit all the companies that I applied to, introduce myself, put a face to the name, and one of those was 60. And so even that still didn't work. So I then went on with following jobs. But during those conversations with Robert, he was like, hey, work on your CAD skills, understand design as best you can, so that when a job opening does open, you're going to be prepared for it and you're an easy plug-in candidate. So what did I do? I'm like, I'm going to use my SolidWorks license at Kimberly-Clark in the paper mill to design some canoe paddles, whatever surfacing experience I could get. And then I would email those to Robert and show him how much I was progressing with my CAD skills.
Killer, man. That's cool.
So
that's cool. That's being persistent. That's awesome.
Yeah. I just never let go of it. Like I said, just constant communication and trying to keep pushing that door open. And so then that's what pushed me to design department, the next job after Kimberly-Clark, because of the feedback I got from Robert.
What's up, OneGang? I used to think that if I spent big money on riding gear with a logo on the back,
I was getting top quality. I gave Leather Up a shot. I wasn't sure at first, could I really get quality gear without spending a fortune? But after putting tens of thousands of miles on their jackets and vests, I had my answer. No busted zippers, no loose stitching, just solid, well-made gear that lasts. Leather Up carries trusted brands like Milwaukee Leather, Hot Leathers, and more, with gear for every rider and every budget. Plus, their customer service actually cares and picks up the phone, something rare these days. So do yourself a favor, check out leatherup.com. Whether you need jackets, vests, chaps, boots, helmets, or luggage, they've got you covered. And because you're part of the OneGang Worldwide family, use code CW20 at checkout for 20% off your entire order. Stop overpaying, gear up with Leather Up, and see the difference yourself. That's cool. Nick, I want to just ask you one quick question. At that point of your career, you're in school, you're looking for work, you're getting yourself prepared. Every engineer in the early stages has first big challenges that they have to go through. Obviously, your persistence to chase your dream, to stay in the industry. What was yours?
I just want to point out before you answer that, how funny it is that we're going to need a reliability engineer. Yeah. Okay, cool. What am I working with? This 50-year-old machine with hand-drawn prints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one big challenge.
Big challenge. I think that's a tough one, but like the first job that I had at that paper mill, the challenge was just that I was still trying to find myself as a professional. And in college, you go from like deadlines every month or week of assignments that are due or the next test that's coming up. And then you get into the professional space. So you have a $300,000 project that needs to get implemented in a year and a half from now. And you have to plan everything and project manage ahead of that.
Adjustment. Yeah.
And without a whole lot of guidance, that was a challenge. And I just got thrown into the fire and just had to figure it out, really. But I would say that's a big adjustment.
That's a huge adjustment
coming up. Yeah.
Right on. All right, man. So let's get into the 60 helmets era. So you joined 60, the brand that changed the entire conversation about concussion protection. How did that opportunity land on your radar?
Yeah, they first got into the motocross space in 2013 with their first motocross helmet, and they really redefined what helmet technology is and impact performance. So they came out with their own system called omnidirectional suspension, and they launched their first helmet with the Geico Honda team in Supercross. And so, of course, that was right on my radar. I'm like, man, this is a new helmet company I've never heard of. So I did a bunch of research into them. And funny enough, I actually did one of my senior design presentations on 60 and research all about their company, presented to my classmates about how the technology worked and everything.
Perfect.
I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the question already. But
just basically, how did that opportunity land? You had mentioned prior, but
yeah. Because you were chasing them down for a while, and he said, improve your skills. And then as soon as something to take us in, how you landed that physical position.
Yeah. So I was still in communication every month up until 2020. And I went out with all my buddies. We went to Anaheim 1 in SoCal in January of 2020. And so while I was there, I also made a point again to visit 60 helmets, and they were talking, let's meet up for lunch or something. And so I went out to lunch and I brought my buddy with me because I was like, yeah, we're just on a tour of these brands. And it turned out to be an interview.
Oh, wow.
So I was out to lunch with Robert and Bob, and they were asking me all kinds of questions. And then I had my buddy sitting next to me at the lunch table. And I was like, so do you guys have a job opening? And they were like, yeah, Nick, that's why you're here. And I was like, oh, okay.
That's cool.
All right. Yeah. So that ended up turning into a job offer a few weeks later. And I was packed up and moving out of Wisconsin within 2 weeks of getting the offer. And so I just had a truck and a U-Haul and grabbed all my stuff in middle of winter, drove out to California, 32 hours. And that's where I ended up actually staying with my relatives in Temecula for a good year and a half because COVID hit a month.
That's right.
So I landed the opportunity, started in early March or late February with 60, and I was there for 4 to 6 weeks I was commuting an hour and a half from Temecula every day, 5 days a week. And then COVID hit and everything came to a screeching halt. And of course, it was great for me because then I could start working remotely in Temecula and didn't have to do that drive. But man, that was really a
Nerve-wracking.
stressful time. Yeah, because I gave up everything. I actually had met my girlfriend, who's now my wife, 3 months before I moved to California. She was in
Nice.
Wisconsin. Hey, I have this opportunity that comes once in a lifetime. I have to take it. And if this works out, it works out. But so I moved out to California, did the whole thing, and then COVID hit, and I was like, oh my God, is this all going to fall apart? And luckily it didn't. It actually went the opposite way, where I was able to just hunker down and prove myself on my first helmet project, which was the ATB 2T, which is a mountain bike trail helmet, and did well on that. And the rest is history there in terms of 6D.
What was your role? Well, what did they put you, and what was the biggest engineering lessons you learned from that ODS system?
Yeah. So I was in the engineering department, and my boss was Robert Reisinger, who is a co-owner of the company and VP of engineering. And so he took me under his wing. The prior engineer had left a few months earlier and went to Oakley. And so I was coming in, and they didn't really have anybody to help them with their helmets, essentially. So I just had to learn from nothing. I was super green, and Robert was the one that was mentoring me and teaching me all about the materials inside the helmet, why their technology was different, how it worked, really provided the good basis for my engineering skill set. Like he was a professor also at Cal State Northridge. I forget what classes he taught, but he was a phenomenal teacher and really believed in understanding the theory behind everything. He was more into, like, when I first started there, he was like, hey, grab every book in this room and absorb the information as fast as you can and try to understand the why behind why we're doing things. And so he taught me all about EPS, EPP, why the rubber dampers in the ODS system are designed and shaped the way they are. And then I was the one that would go and do the work in CAD and actually do the designing. But he coached me and directed me in a lot of ways.
That's awesome, man.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Were you still using SolidWorks at that time?
Yeah. Yep. Still SolidWorks. So that was a super easy plugin, but it was a new challenge where I was going from modeling solids to surfaces, where you're designing the outside of the shell and all the crazy surfaces that happen on helmets. They're like cars. So yeah, a lot of learning there.
Yeah, there's a whole lot to that. So what did 6D get right that the rest of the industry wasn't doing at the time?
Yeah. So the huge thing with ODS and now MIPS also is it's all about trying to separate your head from the shell during an impact. During an impact, if the helmet hits, you want to try to keep your head from moving side to side. You want it to continue in a linear path. So what 6D did is they created 2 layers of EPS that were separate from each other, and they were isolated by rubber dampers. And so the idea there is that when you hit, the shell can move relative to your head, and it can continue to move forward. It can rotate omnidirectionally. 6 degrees of freedom is also where the name 6D helmets came from because of this technology. So they allowed 6 degrees of freedom between your head and the impact surface, essentially. So I can get into all kinds of detail on why the design is or what materials were used, things like that too, if you'd like. But that's really what separated them. And I think what also accelerated MIPS at the same time, because now they had a competitor, and there was also a lot of marketing behind 6D and the technology, how it worked. And so then that also educated consumers worldwide of having that necessity to separate the head from the outside shell.
How did 6D change or shape the engineer that you've become?
Man, being that the technology was fairly complex and is still complex for the space, it forced me to learn every reason why something works. And I was really by myself at the end of the day. Like Robert was there for a good year and a half mentoring me, but then he ended up leaving from 6D also and parted ways doing his own thing. So after a year and a half, I was on my own. And so I really had to do all the testing myself. And if I was redesigning the rubber damper or changing geometry of the inside EPP liner and repositioning cone geometry, things like that, I was forced to just come up with new shapes and thicknesses, test it and try it myself. And there was nobody else to tell me anymore. It was just, hey, you have to solve these problems yourself. And I was thrown into the fire. Fortunately, I came out and succeeded, and I'm a much better engineer because of that.
Heck yeah.
And it's really what accelerated my time here at Fox and Bell. Also, is once I got here, I knew exactly what I needed to do. And I was able to coach other people quite quickly because I was forced to do that at 60 also. Not, I say forced, but I obviously have the passion and fire for it too, where I wanted to do it. I wanted to make safer helmets and really understand the why behind why injuries and concussions are happening.
Yeah. So that segues perfectly into the next topic. So the training wheels are gone, and now we're talking about Fox and Bell. They're two of the most influential brands in the sport. How did your move there happen?
Yeah, so I was 3.5, 4 years in at 60, and I was starting to get to that point where 60 was a very cool company with the base of technology, but we just weren't growing at the rate that I wanted the company to grow at. And part of what was holding us back a little bit was just the cash flow and budget. So I would have to make a lot of concessions with designs or tooling, things like that. And the product would sacrifice because we just didn't have the budget to make the products that a Fox or a Bell could. And so I was already looking around, and ultimately Fox and Bell is those two companies were my number one companies that I wanted to at long term. And I got lit up by a recruiter because at the time in 23 is when the public company that owned Bell, Giro, and a number of other brands, they were called Vista Outdoor. They bought Fox. And so they were based in Northern California. Fox was based in SoCal. And the Fox headquarters was much newer, had a lot more space. And the leadership team, I think, was just a little bit more progressive, new school thinking. And so that company ended up consolidating all the brands into the Fox headquarters and utilized the Fox leadership from there on out. And so I got hit up by the recruiter. It was local, easy switch for me. And so I made that transition over to Fox and Bell in the summer of 23. And so that was kind of a transition.
Nick, what does lead development engineer for power sports helmets actually mean on a day-to-day?
Yeah, so titles for us as an individual contributor, you can start out as a junior product development engineer. Then you go to a mid-level product development engineer. Then there's a senior level of that. And then once you become a lead, at that point, you're transitioning between an individual contributor and a manager. So I think on my LinkedIn, it might still say lead, but now I'm a full-time manager. And so I don't have my own projects anymore. But as a lead, you can manage up to 2 to 3 people on the team and also have projects of your own where you are the technical expert on the helmet technologies and everything that you're developing, and also manage 2 to 3 people. That's the major, I would say, call out of a lead.
Gotcha.
Cool. So walk us through the process and what your favorite parts of the process are. So from sketch to CAD to prototype, lab testing, rider testing, production. If you're using additive manufacturing, what processes you're using, or what software and everything you're using in the entire process. What does that look like?
Yeah, I would say like the early design phases are super fun for me because that's where the product is still taking its own shape. And that's where the most freedom of the product is too. So a huge part of getting a product right is making sure that the brief for the product is well thought out and detailed so that all 3-4 of the people that are working on that one helmet project understand the end goal and know exactly how to get to that end goal. So I think what's fun for me is like working with the team that I have now. There's a variety of complexity of projects. So we might be making a like an MX-10 that just launched this fall, where it's the lower price point helmet. It might be a little bit less complex internally in terms of energy management, but the complexity comes from the cost of the product. So you have to try to pack in all these features, but maintain a lower cost in the product. When you have the high-end helmets where 60 is at in Bell Moto 10, where you have spherical in it, and that's where the complexities of actual design come in. And you can put cost aside a little bit. You just really make the high-end premium helmet. And that's takes a lot more time in the front end, but is also so much more rewarding when the product is launched and you get all kinds of good feedback from the customers.
That's crazy.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, for sure. Nick, how different is the Fox helmet philosophy from the Bell helmet philosophy?
Yeah. So Bell has always been around technology, and generally when new products in the motocross space are launched, there's generally something very new and innovative about it. And it almost always elevates the space that the product is in. So that's the Bell stands for technical superiority. On the Fox side, Fox really started as a gear brand, and it was more of a soft goods company, I would say, to start out, that eventually brought in helmets, boots, and some of the hard goods, and really is more of a design aesthetic company, which has since changed, I would say, in the last maybe 5 years or so, where obviously safety is a huge priority and performance, but still has more design driven initiatives, I would say, where like maybe Bell is able to sacrifice a little bit of the look and feel for technical superiority, whereas Fox really is still very heavy on how the product looks at the end of the day, and may have a little bit of sacrifice in terms of safety, but still is targeting high performance for our athletes also.
Gotcha.
So there's a little bit of a compromise, I would say, and just trying to make sure that the look is cohesive from head to toe for Fox, and Bell can just focus on helmets.
Thanks, man. Thanks for educating us on that one.
Nick, you mentioned the differences between a render monkey and a real innovator. What does innovation actually look like at Fox and Bell?
The big thing about innovation is how to fail and fail quickly. So we have a test lab internal at our headquarters with helmet drop rigs. We have a small wind tunnel, CNC machine, shape shop for all the industrial designers. Anything that you need at your disposal to build anything. Sometimes we bring motorcycles in there and work on those on the side. But yeah, really, it's just being able to think of concepts, have the right people on your team that are blue sky thinkers and really don't put the bounds on new ideas, and go and try it. And then as soon as you try something, even if you think you know what's going to happen, you always learn something. So the more you can prototype, the more you can fail and learn, the better the product will end up being. And that's really where innovation comes from, is being hands-on and getting dirty with it instead of just with renders. Yeah,
that's crazy. Just quickly, I want to just touch on, you had mentioned as far as the testing. For the average person who doesn't understand, most people will buy a helmet based on looks, I guess, the way it fits them and how it looks. And stuff. Take us briefly through exactly what the helmets have to go through in order to pass. Like, what kind of a process does Fox and Bell put their helmets through?
Yeah. So each region of the world has their own helmets test standard. So the US has DOT and Snell. DOT is the only one required to sell the helmet in the US, whereas Snell is a add-on and is a more stringent standard than DOT. And then, of course, Europe has ECE 2206. There is now an FIM 02 standard that is required in racing events for MXGP, MotoGP, and various other regions of the world that also apply that standard. China has their own, Japan has their own, all sorts of different standards across the world. So when we launch a product, we have to take into account all these different standards, and trying to build a helmet that encompasses all in one is very difficult to do, because like DOT, for example, has a penetration test, which means they drop a striker onto the helmet shell, and that striker cannot pierce through the shell and hit the head form. So that means that the shell needs to be fairly thick and fairly rigid to prevent that from happening, which is a good thing. That's great. And then there's other standards in the world, like FIMO2, for example, that kind of force the helmet shell to be round, less edgy, maybe a little bit softer and compliant. That kind of contradicts what a penetration standard wants the helmet to be. So the penetration standard wants it to be stiff, thick, firm. Some of the impact standards require it to be a little bit softer and compliant. And so it's trying to balance all those different criteria throughout the standards.
Gotcha.
And so like for an impact, there are various different anvils that the helmet can be dropped on. So they're all steel anvils and different drop heights, depending to get the right velocity for the drop. And each drop has a acceleration threshold that the head form in the helmet has to be under during that impact. So there's also different types of conditioning. So for a certain impact on a certain anvil, there could be a hot condition where you put the helmet in an oven for 4 hours at a certain temperature and then go drop it on an anvil and see what it does.
Wow.
There's that same thing for cold condition, ambient condition, different solvents on the helmet shell. So these things are rigorously tested and they see a lot of different scenarios before they're put into market. And so that's just what a country needs in order to sell the helmet. And then we go above and beyond that in a lot of scenarios where, one, just to be confident that you're going to pass once you get to the external lab to do the testing, we make sure that we're a certain percentage below that threshold in a lot of cases to make sure that we're going to pass, but also so that we have a safer helmet beyond what the helmet standards are requiring.
A fun question for you. Motorcycle Safety Foundation trainers across the country will tell people, don't throw your helmet on your handlebars when you pull up to throw gas in it or whatever. They recommend to place it on the ground, which to avoid the drop. Nobody does that. Do you have any opinion on that? Does it make you cringe when you see them precariously positioned or something? Or do you think it's really just not that important?
And so I don't think I've heard this one. So the reasoning behind not putting it on the handlebars is just so that it doesn't
because
fall
it
off
can
onto the
fall,
ground.
and if it falls and hits the ground, then
Usually they don't
Yeah.
put on the handlebars not to scratch the gas tank
right.
when the bar is
Yeah.
tired, but
So I've seen this done, and I actually used to do it when I was a kid. Is the first time you get a helmet, you drop it on the ground and get a little scratched up. No, that makes me cringe big time. So yeah, don't drop your helmet unless you have to.
yeah.
There's crazy things that can happen. I've seen it where if you have a little bit of weight inside the helmet, you're stuffing things inside of it and it drops on the ground. Depending on what that EPS density is inside the helmet, it could crush a little bit. We make sure that when we're designing helmets, there's a certain density of EPS that we don't go below because we know it will crack too easy or absorb too easy on a low energy impact. But yeah, it can happen where the helmet does get slightly compromised if it does drop on the ground, depending on the height or what's inside of it.
Nick, let me ask you this. How does rider feedback from pros change how you design? And in addition to, I guess the second part of this question would be like, what crash or rider story has impacted you the most during the development process?
Yeah, the athletes for us are the largest feedback that we get in terms of making changes on the next product because they rigorously test our products every week, every day they're riding, and they're seeing the worst conditions possible for the helmet. So there's a lot of feedback that we get in terms of, one, durability of the helmet. How's the paint holding up? How is the comfort liner absorbing sweat?
Right.
How is the goggle fitment inside the helmet? You've been riding in it for a half hour to an hour and you start sweating in the comfort liner. Now the helmet starts to sit a little deeper on your head or it starts to slide forward and back. Little things like that we can learn from athletes is super helpful. But then you also have to take that feedback with a grain of salt. You have to have a little bit of filter because that's not ultimately who you're selling to. You're selling to the average Joe.
That's right.
And a lot of times there are high performance racers in that category, but they may not like the same fit that a high performance athlete would, or may not need as much sweat absorption, things like that. So we definitely take their feedback and apply it, but also have to keep in mind who you're selling to and what the actual features are for that consumer. Yeah.
I completely understand. The ECE 22.06, that raised the bar for helmets worldwide, right? How is the
Yeah.
industry adapting to this?
So ECE, going back to the test anvils, prior to 2206, there was the FIM 01 standard that required an oblique impact, meaning you would drop the helmet on a anvil that's positioned 45 degrees from flat. So as soon as that helmet hits the anvil on the side, it induces a roll in the helmet. And so that's replicating more of a real life scenario where you're not lawn darting into a flat surface and stopping. It's more of a glance hit. And so they built a test standard around that criteria, and now then elevated the game and the space to require more rotational energy management solutions in helmets like NIPS or ODS from 60. So that certainly elevated the game and made helmets safer from a rotation standpoint. And now the FIM 02 helmet standard that is being required by professional racing in Europe is taking that to another level. And now they're adding a rotational criteria threshold on a linear impact. So if you drop a helmet straight onto a flat anvil, it still has to pass a certain rotation threshold, which means the helmet geometry matters a lot, the shell geometry. So if you're dropping onto a flat anvil and there's a slight ridge on the helmet or something that makes that helmet come off the anvil and spin, you're not going to get a good passing result. So it's going to force helmets to be a little bit thicker and a little bit more round shaped, or there'll have to be some advancement in materials to be able to accommodate for like aggressive shapes on helmets to be able to pass that standard in particular. Yeah.
It's
That makes
amazing.
sense.
For a long period of time, I ride cruisers. I don't ride dirt bikes, but for a long period of time, I've always worn it's not even a DOT helmet. It's basically just a beanie, just to have a helmet on, just to protect from the bug smack in the head. But as I've gotten older, I've started progressing a little bit more into more safety helmets. I wear 3/4 helmets now without the mask, but then I have a full face. It's amazing. I think as you get older, you get wiser on the bike, especially on the cruiser world. And you notice how much safer you actually do feel when you got a full face helmet on, as far as everything that is concerned. So it's awesome that you're educating all of us with this, because this is something you can pull up information, but you can't get it from the horse's mouth type of thing. So it's cool to have you on and truly get educated on this.
Yeah, I think just to expand on that a little bit to help people understand how the energy management of a helmet works is it's very much like the suspension on a motorcycle. So you can tune the damping and spring rate of your suspension, and you can do the same thing with a helmet. We have to pass high speed impacts and low speed. So you may have a section of the helmet that is designed to absorb low energy hits and compresses really easy. And then you may have a section that is higher density and is meant for those higher velocity hits that are much harder to crush and absorb energy. So it's a fun kind of experiment that you can play around and choose different densities, materials, shapes to absorb the energy in the best way possible. So there's a lot more thought that goes into it, I would say, in the last 10 to 15 years than just slapping an EPS inside of a shell.
I know, it's insane.
Speaking of materials, are there any materials or technologies that you're really excited about that are coming down the pike? And if we understand how much detail you can go into can be limited.
I think 3D printing is really intriguing. I've done some tests with that you can get decent energy management out of 3D printing, and it's actually used in hockey right now. I think the CCM helmet uses a 3D printed lattice structure. Even in the NFL, the Riddell helmets use a 3D printed lattice structure to absorb energy. So that works well, like for low energy, repeated multi-impact scenarios. And it's pretty intriguing, even for something like a cheek pad, where you could make custom fit for someone. It's like even our iPhones now, you can 3D scan in somebody at a dealership, get their head shape, their cheek shape, whatever, and they could have a custom fit helmet if you're able
Wow.
to get 3D printing into the helmet space.
Wow.
The challenge right now is that it's extremely expensive to do. It's very limited. You can't
Yeah.
do it at high production scale, but has some serious merit behind it for future of helmets.
Right on. So your work, to take a step back and take the bird's eye view, it's literally about protecting riders' lives. Do you ever step back and think about it from that lens, and does it have any impact on you and give you some kind of concept of influence? Or
It's a balance, because we're in a business. We have to get product out and make money just like everybody else does. But you also want to make the best product possible for the customer. And I think what's maybe different about Fox and Bell is like the team that we have are all very passionate about helmets in general. And that's a very unique skill to have. And generally, I'm not going to hire somebody that just doesn't have an interest in helmets. You have to have that drive and passion so that you're subconsciously making decisions for the betterment of customers and rider safety. So it's not about just saying, hey, this has to pass a certain percentage below what a threshold is to be a safe helmet. It's making every decision possible when building the helmet to make it safer for people. And that could be as easy as making sure there's no sharp edges around the eye port or around the nose area, so that when a crash does happen, you're thinking ahead, because you're not making helmets thinking that a crash is only going to happen once in a blue moon. It's, hey, no, you're building this because crashes happen all the time, and you got to make sure this thing doesn't blow apart when a small crash happens, or anyway. So just always thinking about every detail in every scenario in a crash event is important.
For sure. I'll give you a quick example. I have a 19-year-old son. He was in a motorcycle accident about a month ago, and truck pulled out and he T-boned him, and he was on a sport bike and he went forward. So his face of the helmet hit the door straight on. And I think it was probably one of those cheap ass Amazon China helmets, the garbage ones. I don't know. It was probably just an average at best helmet. And what happened is when it hit him, it broke his teeth in the front the way he hit, because it compacted. So what you're saying, as far as like taking every angle to see how there's no sharp edges, there's none of that, makes a lot of sense. So is that something that you guys do also, as far as to protect the mouth if it hits head on?
Yeah, absolutely. Like a new product that we make, I ensure that there is a soft surface wherever you're going to impact. And in the past, sometimes helmets have a big plastic piece that covers the front chin bar, EPS. That is not the future of safety, right? Like you don't want to go into anything hard plastic when you're in a crash event, or metal for that sake, a helmet latch or something like that. So we always look at that, evaluate it. And then too, like even in the comfort liner, there's the MIPS LFL now, and that can have sharp edges on it if you're not careful. And so making sure that the comfort liner is coming down further than that LFL, so that when you do compress, you're not getting a sharp piece of plastic against your forehead or something.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what advice would you give to guys, gals listening to this podcast that want to come into this industry, who are taking a similar path that you took? What would you have loved to have been told at the time to give you a heads up that maybe now your advice and all your experience, and you're still a young guy, that you can give others coming up?
Yeah. The easy answer there is just never give up. If you're passionate about something, keep being persistent, keep knocking on the door, and it will open. And especially with all the social media that we have now, and how easy it is to connect with people in the industry that you want to get into, just keep badgering people. Eventually that door will open. And in the meantime, until it does open, work on your skill set so that when the door does open, there's no way they can say no.
That's right. Killer, bro. That's great advice, man. Great advice.
All right, man. So, Nick, where can people follow you? What do you got going on? Anything exciting? Floor is yours.
Yeah. Well, I don't have too much going on, but you can hit me up on Instagram, Kers703. My life is fairly private, but always open to chat with people. And for the most part, I've got a new kid now. It's born in July,
Congratulations.
so it's taken up most of my time. And I just look forward to going to the races, especially coming up here in January, Supercross starting. And
Hey, are you going to be at the AIM show?
no, I won't be there, unfortunately.
Oh,
That's
okay.
in Vegas, right?
No, that's in Anaheim this year.
Oh, it's
It's
okay.
January 7th through the 9th, and then right after that's the motocross right there. So,
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I'll have to look into it.
all right,
Thanks for
cool,
bringing that
cool.
up. Yeah.
Hey, Nick, thanks, brother. Thanks for coming on, man. We know you got a heck of a schedule. You got a lot of responsibility at a young age, man. It's awesome to see and hear a journey. You know, we've been doing this now for 2 years, and we've had everybody from every walk of life in our industry. But I love, obviously, the education about what's going on technology-wise in the helmet's amazing. But I love the fact that you knew what you wanted to do. You went to school, you chased 6D, no matter what happened, you checked in and stayed persistent. And look how your life has gone because of that. So we just wish you nothing but success and continue making this industry better, because that's what you're doing, man. And we truly are huge fans of yours and wish you nothing but success.
Very cool. Well, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for the call today. And yeah, thank you.
All right.
Thanks for joining us, Nick. I hope you get some sleep with the new kiddo.
Yeah, no reason. Thank you, guys.
Take care, brother.
See you, brother. Happy Thanksgiving.